This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The Africa Centers for Disease Control calls for a decentralized manufacturing approach if any COVID-19 vaccine is developed. Egypt expands access to face masks by adding them to its subsidy scheme for essential goods. And the Democratic Republic of Congo seeks more funding to help contain its latest Ebola outbreak. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. A Tunisian company unveils its first drone to be used in agriculture and other sectors. And in sports, Real Madrid crowned La Liga champions after a 2-1 victory over Villarreal. We start the program with an update on the COVID-19 situation in Africa. The continent has now recorded over 600,000 cases of the coronavirus. More than 300,000 people have recovered. There have been more than 14,000 deaths. The head of the African Union's disease prevention and control body has said that when a vaccine for COVID-19 becomes available, its manufacture and distribution should be coordinated.
We want to approach this as a continent and avoid a scenario where individual manufacturers approach countries as such to do that. We are not seeking to control efforts from different countries or the vaccine manufacturers, but we seek to coordinate.
Well, scientists in many parts of the world are working around the clock to develop a vaccine for COVID-19. The Africa CDC hopes the continent will not be shortchanged if and when that vaccine is developed.
If there's an available vaccine today, about 7.8 billion people in the world will be in need of that vaccine. So that manufacturing will need to be decentralized as much as possible. And we are very confident that there are groups on the continent that can manufacture, which is different from producing a vaccine.
Let's go to the Eastern Cape province of South Africa, where ambulance services are struggling to cope with the surge in coronavirus cases. The demand for services remains high, but ambulance workers say they are emotionally drained. The Eastern Cape has recorded around 18% of South Africa's more than 300,000 coronavirus cases.
It's a call for help. But each day it's becoming more difficult to dispatch suspected coronavirus patients to hospitals.
At the moment, the reason is because the hospital is full. She was there yesterday. She waited outside for about 4 hours and they couldn't help her because there was no bed available. It's difficult because now we have to explain to the patient what the delay is, and often we know that there are outstanding calls.
In such situations, some patients have asked to be returned home, but others never get the chance to make this request. They die even before the paramedics arrive.
I don't think we could sustain it for another 3 months. And we've worked really hard to kind of, our staff have already taken a 30% knock, and we're now building our way back up to normal. But it has affected us enormously from a business point of view, number one. And it's been stressful for the staff. It's a huge psychological issue to deal with over 3 months. You're dealing with positive people on a daily basis and you've got to go home to your families.
The other fear is that bodies are piling up. Eastern Cape Health Department spokesperson Maana confirmed some mortuaries had reached capacity, but said most of the backlog had been sorted. The state has so far only provided 2 ambulances and 2 buses for COVID-19 patients in and around Port Elizabeth. Chom Hono, CGTN.
Egypt has started offering reusable cotton face masks at an affordable price alongside food items in its state subsidy program. The North African country seeks to make protective gear more widely available to curb the spread of the coronavirus. CGTN's Tuli Shabalala has more.
Egypt has been subsidizing items such as bread, rice and sugar for more than 60 million people. Authorities have now also added face masks to the list of essential goods.
There
was an opportunity to use the supply outlets and the presence of supply cards with 22 million families to offer the masks. The mask is on the card and it's optional for the citizen. We have 19 items which the citizen has the right to choose from throughout the month. We added a new item, the mask, which is a long-lasting mask made of fabric.
The free face masks, though, are limited to 2 per family.
The cost of the mask has now reduced. It's priced at 50 cents. But citizens don't have to pay for it. The price is only for transactions between commercial stores, and so we know how much is produced and sold. But citizens can get the masks for free.
The General Authority for Supply Commodities was tasked with procuring the face masks from local suppliers. An initial 40 million masks were vetted for safety. Those will be made available between this month and August.
Previously, the face mask was $1.25. Now it's just 50 cents. There's a huge difference. With the supply from government, everything is available and cheap for everyone.
In May, Egypt announced fines of about $250 for people not wearing masks in public.
It is something wonderful, of course. All ministries are cooperating to help the citizen to stop infections and things like that.
Egypt has registered over 85,000 coronavirus cases. The North African country recently lifted a partial nighttime curfew. And in efforts to revive its economy, Egypt has resumed international flights, opened restaurants, cinemas, as well as hotels and museums. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
In Uganda, plastic shields on motorbikes could soon be introduced as a means to curb the spread of the coronavirus. The East African country has so far recorded just over 1,000 cases. Leon Senyange reports.
Riding on a motorcycle is often the most effective way to get around in many towns in Uganda. Since the COVID-19 lockdown in March, motorbike taxis, commonly known as border borders, have been restricted to transporting commodities. Some won't be leaving anything to chance regarding infections when they are finally allowed to carry passengers. With this plastic shield, they say they can prevent the spread of the coronavirus.
Even when you have a passenger, you are not close to each other. You cannot get sick before everybody needs to have a mask. We have sanitizers too. We spray everything.
Dixon Ngirani is behind this innovation. He says the plastic partition has been designed to suit the comfort of rider and passenger.
Before this coronavirus, people would move freely and you get into touch with contact, put hands on the rider. But once this shield is put in between the rider and the passenger, there's no direct contact. Even if you cough, even if you spit, even if you do what, even if a rider spits, there is no direct contact.
The shield will cost about $20 a piece. These border shields are yet to be fully rolled out. With motorbike taxis like Luaga's already using them, there is a sense of protection, but safety concerns still remain. According to Uganda Traffic Police reports, motorcycle taxis are responsible for a high number of road traffic accidents in the country. And authorities say the addition of the shield could be a cause of injury in case of a crash. Siraj Nkwanga, who already owns one, sees it differently.
The president was concerned because he thought this was made of glass. It is plastic. The president has not yet seen it. The authorities need to know that.
Uganda is gradually reopening for business and for passengers like Mebo Katushabe, moving about with this kind of protection eases their transportation anxieties.
Because of this guard, we are safe, and actually, when you hold yourself here, you feel more comfortable than being without anything.
while lockdown restrictions on public transport have been. Leon Senanga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Let's turn to the United States now, where hospitalizations are soaring in several states as the number of cases continues to rise. And the Trump administration's response is at the center of much debate and criticism. Nathan King has more from the White House.
The numbers continue to be stark in the United States. 3.5 million cases, over 137,000 dead. And the battle over data continues. Remember, the U.S. government had talked about moving the data from the Centers for Disease Control over COVID to Health and Human Services here in Washington. It looks like now those worries about transparency when it comes to COVID data may be gone for now. The CDC is actually apparently putting those numbers back on its website, but still the political battles continue, from schools reopening to a federal plan to a state's plan. These are the words of a Republican governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan, one of the states that borders Washington, D.C. This was clear that waiting around for the president to run the nation's response was hopeless. If we delayed any longer, we'd be condemning more of our citizens to suffering and death. So every governor went their own way, which is how the United States ended up with a patchwork response. Patchwork is a very good word, as states from Texas to Florida to Arizona and Georgia and others with spiking cases all are having differing responses to whether they close bars, restaurants, wear masks or not. And this is confusing a lot of people. You know, Miami has been really hard to hit with the resurgence. Listen to the city's mayor.
But we need a long-term plan, which is what I've said, right? We need a long-term plan to determine, because we can't be opening and closing and stopping and starting. There has to be a long-term plan, and that's also something that we need to develop over the course of the next few days.
So we'll have to see what happens over the next few days. We do see some leveling off of cases in some areas, but hospitalizations continuing to grow as well. The US hasn't even prepared for the second wave, and the first wave has just been awful. The silver lining perhaps is in retail sales numbers this month for June, 7.5% jump. That actually puts retail sales back in the black for 2020, although establishments like restaurants and bars, of course, are suffering terribly. And also weekly jobless claims, 1.3 million, pretty much the same as last week. People expecting this V-shaped recovery need to look no further than the unemployment mess in this country. It's going to take a lot longer to get back, not helped by the spike in COVID cases. Nathan King, CGTN at the White House.
Well, the state of Arizona currently has the highest rate of positive coronavirus tests in the U.S., pushing hospitals there to the brink. They're in desperate need of more medical supplies and personnel. Now, among the states answering the call to help, Colorado. Hendrik Sybrandry now reports.
Summit Healthcare Regional Medical Center in Show Low, Arizona is under the gun.
Every single day, the COVID counts have been increasing. The numbers that we've been seeing out here have been increasing.
Clinton Anderson doesn't work here. He heads a 14-member federal medical disaster assistance team from Colorado that deployed to the hospital to help relieve stress on the facility, which has been inundated with COVID-19 patients.
They have the beds right now, and they have the rooms, and they have the plans. They're just short on staffing.
Short because the disease has also stricken medical workers, which is why the team's 9 nurses have come to supplement the ones that are still here.
You know, they're working day in and day out. They're working long hours, they're working overtime, and they're passionate about what they do, but they're just exhausted overall.
Unlike Colorado, whose peak in coronavirus cases hit in April, Arizona is peaking now. More than 3,200 cases and 97 deaths on Wednesday. More than a quarter of all tests have come back positive, the highest rate in the nation.
We expect that our numbers will be worse next week and the week following in terms of cases and hospitalizations.
Arizona Governor Doug Ducey is blamed by some for the surge, for failing to aggressively respond to the pandemic. Anderson, the emergency preparedness manager at Colorado's UC Health, wants to reduce frontline workers' virus exposure, make sure
we are wearing the proper masks, and we're wearing the proper PPE, whether it's a face shield, goggles, that type of thing. The longer things go on, just the more lax we get in compliance, and that's just human nature, and it's no different in the hospital.
Nurse Beth Week says some patients have been in this hospital for a while now. She's fighting hard to save them.
You know, those patients are fighting to get better as well. Every day they say, you know, I want to go home. I just want to be able to breathe. So they're fighting very hard. And in that way, it's kind of inspiring.
Arizona hopes to avoid the nightmare of cases New York encountered in the spring.
Just putting in steps where that if that does happen, we'll be in a much better place, in a much better position.
Just off an overnight shift when we spoke to her, Weeks' 2-week stint here is nearly over.
Everyone's tired, whether it's in healthcare or in private industry, in all the industries, and so we're here to come in and provide some relief, and I think that's a crucial role.
At a time when some hospitals, some communities are experiencing this pandemic as if it only recently began. Hendrik Sabrandi for CGTN, Denver.
Well, turning to another health concern, this time in the Democratic Republic of Congo, funding shortfalls are hampering efforts for the country to contain its latest Ebola outbreak. In the last 3 weeks, 28 cases have been confirmed.
It's been less than 2 months since the 11th Ebola outbreak in DR Congo was declared. But it has already spread to 6 health zones. The ongoing response is also facing funding shortfalls, among other challenges.
There are now 56 cases, and this is of great concern, particularly as it is now surpassing the previous outbreak in this area, which was closed off and controlled at a total of 54 cases. Some cases are located in remote areas surrounded by rainforests, demanding additional capacities and resources for the response.
There are a lot of challenges to our vaccination activities. The first is logistics. We're in a place where mobility is very difficult.
Despite this, DRC has made significant achievements compared to previous outbreaks in the country. Locals have been integrated into the response program, more people have been vaccinated, and it took a shorter period to start the process, unlike during the 2018 outbreak in Equator region. The current response builds on lessons learned from the country's previous Ebola outbreaks, which underscored the importance of working closely with communities.
We are going to travel 300 kilometers to Bolomba to vaccinate at least 10,000 people.
The World Health Organization is now calling for additional support to help rapidly scale up the efforts. So far, the Global Health Agency has mobilized $1.7 million, which could last only a few more weeks. Chomohono, CGTN.
Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Egyptian President El-Sisi pledges to protect Libyan sovereignty should it be threatened. And we tell you why conservationists in Kenya are opposed to a fence being put in a section of the Nairobi National Park.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Culture, the thread that holds Africa together. Every corner of the continent has its own story, from the colorful threads in Morocco to the fairy dances of Botswana. But with great strides in technology, this very culture is struggling to stay pure. CGTN Africa brings you a brand new series, a deep dive into some of Africa's most unique communities and their race to survive in the 21st century. Join us as we take an intimate look at Africa's tribes in a flux.
Egypt has vowed to protect Libyan sovereignty should it be threatened. This follows a call from Libyan lawmakers allied to Khalifa Haftar, urging Egypt to help counter Turkish support for the Tripoli-based government of national accord. Turkey has helped the UN-recognized administration to thwart Haftar's Libyan National Army's offensive on Tripoli. Libyan tribal leaders gave their permission to Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and the Egyptian army to intervene. This latest meeting reflects the growing regional stakes in Libya.
The red lines that we have announced are primarily a call for peace and the end of conflict in Libya. But we will not stand idle in the face of any moves that pose a direct threat to the national strategic security on our western border, especially during the increased military mobilization around the city of Sirte. I hope that our Libyan brothers in the West can understand this and give it a chance so that the situation does not escalate, because we honestly will not stand idle if that line is breached.
The Sudanese government and a coalition of 9 rebel groups have entered into a final phase of peace talks. The negotiations center on the creation of a unified Sudanese army. Mediators describe the discussions as the most important component of Sudan's peace process. They aim to restore stability to the war-torn regions of Darfur, South Kordofan and Blue Nile. The coalition of rebel groups has also negotiated for 3 seats in the Sovereign Council, which is currently running the country. The parties agreed on a timeline of 39 months for a transitional period after the signing of a comprehensive peace agreement last year.
The political negotiations are done and only the security arrangement remains. And that is the key in the agreement, the security aspect. And if we discuss it here in good faith and sign on it, it will pave the way to signing the final agreement that all the parties agree on with all the security sectors.
We are completely ready to finalize a peace agreement that avoids using the security bodies for political, ethnic or ideological disputes. This cannot happen except by security arrangements which target security bodies around the country. We need a security sector that respects the constitution and is held responsible before the law in order to serve the citizens and the country.
Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni has called for free and fair elections in South Sudan. The remarks came during a virtual summit of the leaders of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development. Here's DGTN's Michael Baleke with more.
President Yoweri Museveni says the ultimate remedy to all conflicts in Africa are elections. But the Ugandan leader also argues that the elections should be well planned and must be free and fair.
The elections will enable all parties to be accountable to the electorate. And as you have seen in a number of African countries, that creates more discipline in society, because if you are going to ask for votes, you must behave well toward the population, otherwise they will not vote for you.
President Museveni made direct reference to South Sudan. In February this year, the South Sudan President Salva Kiir and his rival Riek Machar signed an agreement on the establishment of a transitional government, ending a 6-year civil war that killed hundreds of thousands and displaced millions. President Museveni also used the opportunity to call upon the 6 IGAD member states who are mediating the crisis talks in South Sudan to work together to develop a vaccine, produce their own diagnostic tools, treat and fight off the COVID-19 pandemic.
We must get antivirals which kill the virus. That's what we need. We are working on this, and I'm sure we can work better if we all work together.
The online Zoom meeting was also attended by the presidents of Kenya, South Sudan, Somalia and Djibouti, as well as Ethiopia's Prime Minister. The meeting, chaired by the Sudanese Minister Abdallah Hamdok, was originally scheduled to take place in Khartoum. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
And here in Kenya, conservationists and some community groups are opposing plans to fence the southern boundary of the Nairobi National Park. They say doing so will block migratory corridors for wild animals.
These are fresh footprints of a lion, probably a lioness. And then you can see the ones of the young ones here.
The Maasai community says caves about 10 kilometers outside Nairobi's national park
are frequently used by lionesses and their cubs. But the caves by the Enilinye River, a favoured refuge for breeding lions, may be cut off for good.
That fighting of resources and inbreeding among different lion families will lead to the decline of certain species. We used to have a lot of cheetah in Nairobi National Park back in the days. We used to have a lot of wild dogs, but due to that fragmentation of the wildlife habitat around and inside Nairobi National Park led to most of them going. We only have one cheetah now.
Nairobi National Park was set up in 1946, about 7 kilometers south of Nairobi's central business district. The Kenya Wildlife Service has proposed a 10-year plan to fence land along the park's southern boundary. This has caused many conservationists to raise alarm over the move.
So why don't they upgrade the current facilities without thinking of destroying the black rhino habitat? This is the only black rhino sanctuary in the whole East Africa. So why do you want to kill it and focus more on infrastructure?
Then you're basically talking about making these animals lack space to move, lack space to breed, lack space to move from one habitat to another, move to better pastures during the dry season.
As the city has expanded around it, the park has been fenced on 3 sides. But the southern side has always been open to allow for the movement of animals.
You see a lot of game outside the park during the rainy season because the conditions here where we are is very palatable. Why? Because the community uses this particular piece of land to graze their cattle and their livestock, domestic livestock. And wildlife love that kind of fresh grass that is growing every rainy season. The conditions inside Nairobi National Park are not palatable for wildlife to stay inside.
The plan proposes to fence in willing landowners, and if they refuse, only the park will be closed off. For many of them, this will end the freedom to move across wide swathes of land, which benefit both wildlife and the local Maasai herders.
Their way of life is compatible with conservation, meaning that the animals move from one place to another in search of pastures and water. The herbivores eat the grass that the cows eat. Whatever is healthy for the herbivores is healthy for the cows. And being that it allows us to keep our land open, allows us to keep the land without interference, then we love it that way, we appreciate it that way.
Nairobi National option, with the new plan indicating the same consequences. However, the proposal still remains in place. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Recapping your top stories this hour, the Africa Centers for Disease vaccine comes to market. Egypt expands access to face masks by adding them to its subsidy scheme for essential goods. The North African country seeks to make protective gear more widely available to curb the spread of the coronavirus. And the Democratic Republic of Congo seeks more funding to help it contain its latest Ebola outbreak. In the last 3 weeks, 28 cases have been confirmed. Now let's turn to news from Ghana. The country is opening its doors to African Americans in the United States, offering them an opportunity to relocate to the West African country. This follows recent protests against racism and police brutality in the U.S. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports.
Dr. Obadele Kambon was born in the United States, but in 2008, he left his birthplace to settle in Ghana after becoming frustrated with racial abuse in the U.S.
That anti-blackness, right, in the United States, as I call it, it was just, too much to put up with. So I said, I don't have to put up with this. I've been elsewhere. I know that there are other, opportunities and other places that I can live. So, Ghana called and I responded.
Dr. Kambon says in Ghana, he does not have to worry about being arrested or killed by the police for doing nothing wrong. He points to the death of George Floyd at the hands of Minnesota police as an example of the risks faced by black people in America. Floyd's death has sparked protests against racial injustice. It has also reignited calls for people of African descent to return to Africa, the land of their ancestors.
It shouldn't be just as a tourist, just as an investor. That's an exploitative relationship. It should be on the basis of when you come, you have the opportunity to come back to your birthright, which was stolen when you were kidnapped, when your ancestors were kidnapped so many years ago. And then as a citizenship, you can help to build Ghana from the ground up. that's where it becomes a mutually beneficial partnership.
But it's not been easy for Dr. Kambon and his family to obtain Ghanaian citizenship. It came after 8 years of living in Ghana. Only the president can approve a foreigner's application for Ghanaian citizenship, and they have to have lived in the country for at least 5 years.
We are the Africans who are returning home, and this is our right, and this is part of the history of us returning home.
Dr. Kambon says an easier path to citizenship could spur many people of African descent living outside Africa to relocate to Ghana, and also strengthen Pan-Africanism, a movement that unites Africans and all people of African descent. It's not the first time Ghana is reaching out to the people of African descent to come back home. Since gaining independence in 1957, the West African country has strived to promote itself as a leader in Pan-Africanism. The government says it is renewing the call for the African diaspora to relocate to Ghana so that they can escape the racial injustice that still exists in the West. Ghana's government is even offering incentives. It says 500 acres of land can be used to build houses for at least 1,500 families that want to relocate. Experts want the government to create platforms that will help the African diaspora embrace their African identity.
I think that first question about identity and belonging construction from an African lens will tell diasporan Africans not only that I need to come back home, but Africa is my home. While we have diasporan Africans coming back home, on the continent, we need to make opportunities for continental-born Africans to stay at home and make their contribution to development.
Dr. Obadele Kambon agrees a Pan-Africanism agenda is a key step towards getting other African countries to extend a welcoming hand to all people of African descent living in the West. Having found peace in Ghana, he hopes the African diaspora will return and settle in the continent they can always call home. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Well, time now for a short break. Your business news up next. Coming up, a Tunisian company unveils its first drone to be used in agriculture and other sectors.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
A Tunisian company has unveiled its first drone to operate in agriculture and other sectors. Manufactured by a team of engineers from the Telnet Group, the drone will help monitor crops and livestock, as well as assist rescue operations during floods. And as CGTN's Adnan Chouachi reports, the drone could be an important tool in reaching remote areas.
Mohamed Frikha is a successful engineer and entrepreneur. The founder of Telnet Holding expressed his pride after he led a team of Tunisian technicians and successfully manufactured a drone at a local research unit.
It's the first time in Tunisia's history that an autonomous drone is 100% produced with Tunisian expertise at Telnet. It can operate in agriculture, security, and enable equipment delivery to inaccessible areas and also border surveillance.
The project coordinator says this autonomous drone can fly up to 8 hours and operate 24 hours per day. It is capable of flying over a distance of 800 kilometers.
This drone weighs 50 kilograms. It can carry a 10-kilogram multi-purpose payload, including a camera and other components for distant destinations and missions.
Telnet's technical director asserts that the company plans to export the drone to the international market.
We target the international market. We'll export our products to many countries in the Middle East region, as well as African countries, where there's a huge demand for this drone, which can offer many services.
The drone is equipped with an automatic flight system, as well as remote control and anti-collision system. The research and manufacture project for the first Tunisian drone was launched at Telnet Laboratories 2 years ago. The company is now expecting the drone certification to begin the first test flights in many regions across the North African state. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
In Uganda, thousands of teachers are without jobs following the closure of schools in March because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Many, though, are picking up new skills in order to stay in the job market. Leon Senyangi tells us more.
It's been months since Ismail Lubega stood before a class. The closure of schools due to the COVID-19 pandemic put the teacher of history out of work. Without pay for months now, he has taken on another job in construction.
As a teacher, you're supposed to be very quick in thinking. You're supposed to work very fast. Because when the situation, we realize that we don't know when COVID is going to end, we realize that we can't just sit.
Lubega is not alone. With savings from their group, these teachers purchased raw materials and are now making paving stones.
We used to sit every Thursday and we collect some money, 20,000 each, and we realized that we can use this money in COVID so that we can start instead of sharing that money.
And it is already picking on. The teachers here say they learned how to make the paving stones in a few weeks. The group can now produce about 700 pavers a day. All take turns to work here, and they say they can make more pavers than they already do.
We believe that we can make even 1,000 or even 2,000, but we are limited by the machinery that we have, so it becomes really hard. Like you've seen, we are so many today, but then the machinery is lacking, so we are not making the optimum that we ought to make.
Uganda has more than 360,000 private school teachers. It's still uncertain when they will return to the classrooms. And the longer schools are closed, the more Frederick O'Doul worries.
The teachers who have learned some of these skills, the teachers who have earned some little money from these different jobs that they have been doing, sincerely, it will be very difficult for them to go back to class. Now, and that calls for our directors, that calls for the government to come in and support the private schools so that even the salaries of the private school teachers should be increased.
For now, the fuel cells are helping Lubega and his colleagues pay their bills. That could probably go on much longer, at least until Uganda is declared coronavirus-free. Leon Senyange, CGTN, Nsanji, Central Uganda.
Meanwhile, in South Africa, the impact of the coronavirus crisis on the aviation industry continues to be felt. But one entrepreneur has seen an opportunity to launch a new South African-based airline. CGTN's Angela Coppola has more.
Giron Novik, founder of Kalula and ex-CEO of Comair, says COVID-19 has turned the airline industry on its head and created a window of opportunity with equipment, facilities and people readily available.
There's an abundance of all of those in the current environment. In fact, there's an excess. And on the back of that, there's obviously an opportunity to acquire resources, both physical resources at very good prices, and also to attract very, very good experienced talent locally to run a successful enterprise.
The airline industry is dollar-based when it comes to planes and fuel. That's a challenge if the local currency is weak.
And more than half of the input costs are in US dollars. The costs that are in local currency are very efficient and a very high caliber of facilities and people that are paid in rands. On the flip side, or let's say on the revenue side, it's also a mixed bag. So we obviously price in local currency, but over time, and certainly not now, with the aftermath or with the impact of COVID, tourism is non-existent. Certainly international tourism, but longer term, that's obviously a significant part of the airline business, the local airline business.
The so-called new normal will have an impact on all economic activity, including the airline industry.
Business travel will reduce. I think that's an obvious one. The kind of calls that we're on now, and millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions of people have been doing throughout COVID, is going to change the way that business is done and will reduce the requirement for business travel. So one can't be complacent. Many airlines in the past have really relied on business travel to keep them afloat. Business travelers pay more. They're less price sensitive, and I think that will be a lot more challenging.
It's been suggested that airlines aren't the most efficient businesses, but the new environment may lead to a change.
Airlines are a strange thing. The bigger they get, I believe, the less efficient they become. And, the idea of economies of scale, I'm not sure always applies in the airline industry. And in fact, I think you often get the opposite. So being small, being nimble, being agile, getting the timing right are very key parts of this particular business model.
While the global airline industry is in crisis, opportunities will present themselves and entrepreneurs will take advantage. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Coming up, we look at efforts to promote racial diversity in the world of classical ballet.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The Black Lives Matter movement continues to inspire millions around the world, and the anti-racism conversation is also reaching the classical ballet world. Ballet has been slow to accept black dancers in major companies, resulting in a lack of diversity, equity and inclusion. But 3 professional dancers are hoping to change this narrative through social media. CGTN's Julie Shire has more.
Classical ballet has evolved, but it's still not where it could be. To this day, it remains mostly white. Based around their personal experiences, 3 professional dancers created Blacks in Ballet, a social media platform that pushes for change. Fabio Mariano dances for Collage Dance Collective. He uses this platform to highlight, celebrate and collaborate with Black ballet dancers around the world.
We saw a need showing people the amount of beautiful and talented Black dancers that there are in the world, that a lot of people don't know about them. And with that, we hope to reach company directors to see that there are Black dancers, so they don't have the excuse of saying we don't find talented Black dancers good enough to hire for our companies.
From the slums of Rio de Janeiro to New York's ballet stage, Ingrid Silva is a professional ballerina for the Dance Theater of Harlem in the US.
It's been a blessing creating for the first time a platform exclusivity for Black dancers worldwide. People always say, where are the Black dancers? We don't know them, we don't see them. Where are the Black dancers? And I was like, there is so many of us. We highlight the past, future, and present. It's really important to know the history, who came before us, and gave the space for us to be here today.
In South Africa, Juan Galdino is a senior soloist for Joburg Ballet. He hopes their platform will spread the passion and message further.
It's sad because you have to do this platform. It's sad that we have to talk about it. But it's amazing because it's happening. It's amazing and very inspiring to see that people now is looking at different eyes. Today I can use my voice and my own experience, not just to make awareness, but to inspire other Black dancers, to help educate not just the dancers who actually dance right now, but educate the entire system. Because it's a situation that I really think that everyone have to understand that it happened, and black people don't really have a lot of opportunity in that career.
The platform has become even more relevant now because of the Black Lives Matter movement and renewed debates on history and equality.
What is happening to ballet now? And it's sort of moving towards celebrating its black artists and sort of working to fix the mistakes of the past, and with the Black Lives Matter movement that's happening at the same time.
This initiative hopes to have a fundamental change in the world of ballet and to keep the dream alive for so many. Julie Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
To Burkina Faso now, where filmmakers are using humor to educate people about the coronavirus. The awareness campaign has aired on television and spread on social media. Tuli Shabalala has more.
These filmmakers in Burkina Faso are creating mini-movies about the coronavirus. The films have a touch of comedy and are made in the local language. Producers aim to raise awareness about COVID-19 prevention.
At this event, we took 11 young comedians from Burkina Faso who made creations on COVID-19. They brought out everything fun and funny about the virus. We also did sketches in the 4 most spoken languages in Burkina Faso. And through these sketches, we gave awareness messages that were broadcast on local television channels and on social media networks. So that's how we contributed to this fight against COVID-19.
Burkinabe filmmakers have recorded more than 50 films during the months of lockdown.
We've shown the population through our capsules what to do and what not to do to stop the spread of the virus. People don't like the sketches to be serious. They like the humor. So we went through humor, and it amuses them, and at the same time, it educates them.
Local citizens say they have enjoyed watching the films on television and social media.
I have seen on television and on the internet several videos on COVID-19 that have left a lasting impression on me. There are 2 Burkinabe actresses, Afisatu and Albertine, who made videos together, and I like them a lot. And also I learned a lot about COVID-19. And then they got the message across in a very humorous way, and it was very interesting.
I didn't know much about social distancing measures, but thanks to these videos, I finally understood how to avoid being contaminated.
Through their videos, Burkina Faso filmmakers have made their own contribution to the fight against the pandemic. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Your sports news up next. Coming up, Real Madrid crowned La Liga champions after a 2-1 victory over Villarreal.
How would you create